Welcome to Le Rendezvous. My name is Garance Doré and I'm a writer with so many stories to tell and ideas to share that I created this special moment to talk about all the things that are going on in our lives. So come, let's spend a moment together. Le Rendezvous is brought to you by Doré, the skincare line I co-created, wanting to bring more simplicity and efficacy to our lives. Check out the end of the episode for a special code just for you, the Rendezvous listeners. One of the few things you might not know about me, I know by now you know almost everything, but one of the few things is that I used to be very, very shy. And if you know me right now, I'm pretty much the opposite. I'm someone who speaks to strangers. I've done public speaking. I am recording a podcast right now. It's very easy for me now to communicate with people, whether it's in real life or online. Connecting with others is one of my favorite things to do in the world. I speak many different languages, even if sometimes it's just a few words. I'll always try to connect with people everywhere I am. It's really one of my favorite things in life, and I think that's one of the things that defines me and that made my career and many other things. But the funny thing is I used to be the shyest person you could ever imagine. So today I wanted to explore that with you. So maybe if you feel shy and don't really know what to do about it, maybe my experience could help you. I have to say that I didn't start very shy, actually. When I was a very little girl, there was something very funny actually. I thought that when we were walking down the street, which is something you do a lot in the south of France, it's a street culture. There's a lot of people on the street. And I thought that my job was to say hi to everyone that I crossed on the street. I just loved it. And I think I was, about 8 maybe. And I remember my mom jokingly telling me, you don't have to do that. And that it surprised me. So I can't exactly date when is the age when I became worryingly shy. Probably around my teenage years, which, it's always the moment. It's kind of a big bang of personality. Everything gets reshuffled and you become sort of a different person in a way. I think when I was from 0 to 8 or 10, I was the person that I lost and took the rest of my life to find again. So I'm a teenager, and that new me is very embarrassed with her body and all the changes, and it creates a whole new rapport to the world where I kind of want to hide myself. I hide under big sweaters. And then there is also all the social dynamics that go on at school. You're not in école primaire anymore. You're at what we call in France collège, which is high school. And there is categories of people. There are the cool ones, the weird ones, and all these things. And I always, and that's something that also kind of manifested in Fashion Week, I always wanted to be part of the cool ones, but I was always too shy, too intellectual, maybe thinking too much, not outside of myself enough. So I spent my first year at high school with a group of a few people. We were about 3 and sometimes a little more. And we were the nerds. And that was this weird mix between kind of a little bit nerdy, kind of a little bit cool, never really fitting exactly anywhere. There's so much to say about the cool people in high school, isn't there? Life never turns out to be exactly the way it was at high school. And a lot of it was about how shy I was, how I didn't think I would fit in, and how this world of the cool guys scared me. Number one, I didn't have the money to buy the same cool clothes as they had. And where I come from, the way you dress is super important. Number two, I never felt like I had the social ease that they had. And number three, I was not the cute girl. And there were all these girls and I just was weird. And so I just did that. I just stayed weird. It was a comfortable place. And meanwhile, my shyness just kept growing because in hiding, I kind of cultivated it in a way. At the same time as this high school drama was going on, which was not a drama at all for me because I was just hiding in my little corner with my two friends, I was also working at my father's restaurant during the summer. That's something I wasn't really given a choice. And my parents first tried to put me front of house, meaning that I was a waitress when I was about 14, 15. And to me, that was an absolute hell. I was so shy. I couldn't talk with people I didn't know. I felt like they were after me. I thought people were too demanding. And when anything went wrong, I would literally break down and cry. I would go hide in the kitchen and cry. And my family still makes fun of me kindly to this day. They remember me getting completely red, getting completely inflamed, getting so beat up anytime anyone would ask me a question that wasn't in my script. I was just terrified, and I don't really know why. I also had this big problem, which I still have to this day, and that will come back a lot during this episode, is that I tend to get really red when I'm embarrassed, when I'm courageous, when I do things that are not fitting exactly in the frame that I've been given. And at this time of my life, I just had no idea how to manage it. So if I felt like I was becoming red, I would just crumble. I would just not be able to speak. It was something that was really, really difficult for me. Okay, enough about that. You get it. I was this very hidden, shy, filled with insecurities teenager, like most teenagers, but maybe a touch more, with aspirations of being cool, doing amazing things, dressing well. And so I had already at that time these huge contradiction within me, this sense of wanting to be private, wanting to hide, being extra sensitive to other people, to other energies. And at the same time, within me was this desire to be seen, to be loved, to be cool, all these kind of things. The second big bang that I got at that time was when, at 14, I met who would become my very best friend. I had grown up in Corsica, in a small town. I had never really traveled, even though that was my biggest dream. Because number one, we didn't have a ton of money to do that. And number two, my parents were working seasonally. So when we were on vacation in the summer, they would be working. So there wasn't a lot of traveling for us. And one day, as I was hanging out with my weird friends, by that time I had become part of the skateboarder group of the town, which weren't cool, were more really nerdy, because being cool at that time in my town was going to the beach, wearing comme des garçons. I don't know, there was this weird mix that I was definitely not a part of. Oh, it was the time of windsurf, so it was all these boys with their blonde hair. It was kind of a reenactment of what we thought cool California was. Anyway, one day I was hanging out with my friends, and this girl arrives, and she's the absolute opposite of me. She is very skinny, and I'm more curvy. She's blonde, and I'm a brunette. And more importantly, she is so outgoing. She's so easy. She is the absolute contrary of everything that I am, in my corner, intellectualizing everything and being too shy to speak out. She's just being herself, and she's absolutely unapologetic, and she's hilarious. And we fall in love with each other. We become instant best of the best friends. And she is someone who changed my life. I have a feeling that one of the reasons why she was like that, there's a few things. Number one, she grew up with two big brothers that used to bother her all the time. And so she had to learn to stand up for herself very early on. There was no crumbling possible because her brothers just wouldn't let that happen. They would just keep annoying her. So she had to learn to raise her voice and to find her space in her family. The other thing is that her parents had the type of work where you travel and you have to relocate every 3, 4 years. And she had lived in so many countries, which was one of the things that I thought so fascinating about her. And I think that because of that, number one, she had to readapt to a new school, a new country so very often. New environment, new languages. She had to learn so many languages. When I met her, she was still speaking fluently Brazilian, Italian. It was this incredible openness to the world. And lastly, I think, compared to me, she hadn't grown with the same sense of self consciousness that you can have in small towns, where everybody knows you, everybody knows your parents, everybody knows what car you're driving, where you come from, all of these things, and you carry a bit of weight as you're going through life. And the idea of shame, of honor, of all these things are much stronger because you have a name. There is no anonymity. And so it will make you much more careful about every little action that you take. She didn't have that. As much as growing up changing countries all the time was difficult, she probably understood very soon that there is different cultures, different ways to see the world, different ways to judge people all across the world. So all that to explain how strikingly different both our personalities were. And I couldn't stop admiring her. I just enjoyed, I don't know if you, it's almost like enjoying a great wine, enjoying the personality of someone you love and just sitting there and looking at them be so generous with themselves, be so open, be so simple in the way that they were behaving with others and they were presenting themselves to the world. And I was looking at her and I was like, she feels so free. This is so fabulous. One of the things that I remember probably changed me is that some of the shame that I was feeling the most was about being ignorant. It's something that I've always had, and that might be because French culture is very intellectually snobbish. You've seen our books, I've talked about it before, but they're very, even their covers are very serious. There is something about culture that is very revered and that we're all supposed to have. And if you haven't read a book that you're supposed to have read, like Zola or whatever, you might not admit it. And I remember by that time, my best friend and I were sharing an apartment together in Aix-en-Provence. And I remember one day we were at this amazing brasserie, which I wonder if it still exists, probably does, called Les Deux Garçons, the two boys. And I remember talking with our new friends, two guys that were studying law and that were incredibly interesting. We were talking about something political, and I remember her saying, I don't know anything about that. Will you explain it to me? And how shocked I was by how candid she was and how she didn't feel bad about being naive. And what marked me the most was how, with one simple question, she had disarmed the whole audience. So basically, everybody was trying to have this debate, to one up each other, to act like they knew exactly what they were talking about, which is something everybody does in society constantly. And nobody was showing any humility. And when she came out and just said, I have no idea what you guys are talking about, please explain to me, it's like the pressure came down completely and everybody suddenly relaxed and was able to be themselves again. And she laughed about it and she said, I'm sorry if I'm stupid or something just simple and very herself like that, self deprecating without being too hard on herself. And we explained to her as much as we could, and the conversation kept moving on. And I think what I witnessed that day was the most important thing to me, and something that probably informed everything about the rest of my life, basically. I saw that by being authentic and honest and herself, she was reaching directly into the heart of people and making them feel better and calming down their insecurities and taking all the pressure down. And you know how you remember important moments in your life by completely visualizing the moment? We came out of Les Deux Garçons and I walked down the street with my group of friends thinking and telling myself, this is it. I'm just not going to be shy anymore. This person is not going to be me anymore. I had just learned one of the most important lessons in my life. And if you remember how I used to be, so this love for saying hello to people, for communicating, for reaching out, there she had given me the secret of human connection. And that day, a lot of my shame and my preconceptions and in some ways my insecurity melted down just right there and then. Just this message suddenly hit home. I decided to completely become someone else. I decided to model my behavior on her. And I know how creepy it sounds, but bear with me. I think it's very important to try to understand the things that we admire. Sometimes with her, I was never jealous because she just had this magic about her, right? This disarming authenticity and humility. But anytime I felt inspired, anytime I've even felt jealous, and I will absolutely have to do, well, many episodes about jealousy actually, because it's something that I've learned so much about over the years. But there is always something inside me that looked into it. Why am I feeling that? And is that because it's something that I would want for myself? So before you think that I became that crazy friend like in that movie, what was it, in the 90s? Anyway, most of you won't remember either. Before you think I became that, it's not that I stole her personality or changed who I was profoundly. But what I did was to try to adopt a different behavior and to see how it worked for me. So I didn't change who I was, I just changed how I was and how I was communicating with other people. And it might sound easy just said like that, but it actually takes a lot of courage. It actually takes a lot to come out of your shell and consciously change your behavior. The idea was pretty simple. It was to be real. It was to say when I didn't know something. And if you've ever had these moments, you know that a lot of shame comes up. I mean, for me, that's what it was. And it was learning to let my shame come out. So roll through my shame, go through it. Ask, oh, I haven't read that book, even if it's something that I absolutely knew I should have. You know, there's all these books that we've never read that we know we should have. And people are like, what? You never read that book? That's a very French reaction, but you know what I'm talking about. And just say, no, I haven't. I really want to do it. It's on my list. You want to tell me what you're talking about that you loved in that book? Of course, it never sounded that confident, but I would let those bad emotions, those bad feelings kind of roll through me. Same thing with going to speak with someone that I was impressed by. Instead of saying mute, silent in the corner, just telling myself, say something. Say hi to them. Say that you like their pants. Tell them they just said something that's very interesting. Ask them a question. Come out of your shell. Just manifest yourself. And the same way I felt shame admitting when I didn't know something, with this, I knew that I was going to turn bright red like a tomato. And that's how my shyness would express itself. And there again, I told myself just go through it. And if it's really too embarrassing, just laugh at it and say, oh my God, I feel like I'm getting super red, and laughing about it. That was very difficult to do, but I taught myself the courage. And that's why I'm saying changing your behavior, it's a switch for sure. Doesn't make it easy, because then it takes all that courage to go after that. And then there was just the courage of being honest with where I came from, who I was, what emotions came up, all these kind of things that just, I mean, honestly, when I think about it, made me the person that you probably know today. This took a few years of training, I would say, or like a few years of pushing myself. You do get used to feeling your shame, to feeling your embarrassment, to feeling yourself getting red. You do feel those things, and they will still come up. I remember the other day I was having a conversation with Graham, and I think I was telling him something. I don't remember. I became so red, and he started making fun of me. And it triggered a lot of things inside me, but I knew it was a good thing, because you need to be able to let these things roll so that you can get through them to the next step, to the next stage. The reason why I didn't make this episode about confidence, because of course, this is what I developed in a way through my change of behavior, is because confidence is this, but it's also a lot of other things. And we'll talk about that another time. It is also because deciding not to be shy doesn't mean that you're thoroughly confident at all. I wasn't confident when I was 18, 19, and when I started changing. I didn't know anything. I had no skills. I had never proven myself, whether it was in a relationship or in work or whatever. I had everything to prove. I didn't have any special confidence. But not being shy meant that I was okay with not having confidence. And that is one of the most important concepts, if you want to take it away from this episode, is that you don't need to build loads of confidence to become much less shy. You just have to be human and to be able to understand, I don't have confidence in that. These are the reasons. Maybe I'm too young. Maybe I don't have any experience in that. Maybe, as I was talking about my relationship with my body in the episodes about food, maybe it's just something you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life, and that's okay. Lack of confidence shouldn't prevent you from doing things, because if you wait to have confidence before you do things, you won't do half of the things that you could do. So that's why this episode is not about confidence. We'll talk about confidence another time. This is about just not being shy. Here is also the other thing that I discovered in my change of behavior. So number one was that it takes courage. Number two was that don't wait to be confident to get over yourself. And number three, I realized with horror, oh my God, a lot of what was my shyness was actually a lot of self-centeredness. When I was shy, when I was mute, when I was hiding in my corner, I was just thinking about me constantly. I was never out of myself. It was me. What are people going to think of me? How am I going to appear? It was so narcissistic. It's so self-centered to think that people care, to think that it matters if you know everything, if you look perfect that day. It's so self-centered to think that you have to be perfect to be out in the world. What was that? And that's why sometimes when I see shy people, I just want to tell them, and of course, I don't, because it's a personal journey. You have to go through it to understand it. But I just want to tell them, get out of your own way. People don't really care so much. And what people really want to is connect heart to heart, insecurity to insecurity, and just open up to one another. And you can't get people to open up if you're constantly closed because you think that they're judging you. And that creates a lot of missed opportunity, missed connection. And yeah, to me, it's just such a shame because life, when you're out of your own way, when you care about yourself in the sense of self love and all that, but when you don't make it this prison about being perfect, being unfallible, being fully confident, life opens up and it's so much more beautiful and authentic and real, and you get to connect with the best people, honestly. I truly think that this huge lesson that I learned actually informed my career. I think that it helped me grow and get through all of it because then when I started in fashion, and trust me, my insecurities and my shame came back so many times when I was in fashion. But overall, when I was able to come back to home base in my soul, inside of me, I knew that it was the sense of being real, of sharing my true experience, of sharing my heart with others that made me happy and made me feel like I was fulfilling my mission in this world. I also developed a few tricks. I never Google myself, for example. I've never done it. It's just panicky for me. And even when I was really out there in the public eye, I never really read stories about me. I never looked at my numbers as much as I could. The idea being to not have a thought at all about the perception that people could have of me. Because anytime I do that, I go back into this self centeredness. And the idea is to be out there with our heart open. So I try to keep that. I try to never look at myself from the outside in, only from the inside out, if you will. Before I go, I wanted to talk about public speaking, which I know is terrifying for, well, everyone, me included, even though I have learned that I also love being the center of attention. I love it. When I'm on stage, if I'm able to make people laugh, to make them interested, it's something when people ask me what would be another career that you would have done had you known yourself the way you know yourself now, I probably would have adored having a stand up comedian type of career. Not that I have the talent that it takes, but it's that sense of the energy that you receive when you're on stage. And I think it's very important also. And that's part of me trying to be real. I think it's important to talk about the joys of being the center of attention without making it something that we're trying to hide. Oh no, I don't care about being famous. I don't care about, people following me. So, just to say, I enjoy being on stage. I enjoy gathering people around me. I do. It's a pleasure. And if you've ever had it, I think it's a pleasure for most of us. But of course, before you can have that, you have to, in some ways, get over yourself. So, just 3 points about public speaking. Also, just know that I'm not a professional public speaker, even though maybe one day I will, because it's really something that I love. Number one, you have to have the deepest respect for your audience and get there prepared. People who buy a ticket to see you, people who take time in their day to come see you deserve something that's not just, oh, I'll just wing it. So anytime I've done public speaking, I was prepared. And if I ever was to do it again, I'll probably get a coach and train myself to walk across the stage, to speak without having to read, all these kind of things that I'm not pro enough to have given time to that. Number two is very important. You have to be comfortable in your clothes and in your beauty, or however you want to call it. So, for example, for me, I'd be much more comfortable wearing pants and having my hair back. I should do a whole episode about my hair, but you know that. My hair changes too much when it's down, and that's why I had it up for my wedding, all these things. I just don't want to have to think about it because it drives me crazy. So for public speaking, that is one of the most important things. You want to take your appearance out of the way and feel the most comfortable that you can be so that you don't think about it, because what you have to think about is what you're giving to your audience. The last tool is true vulnerability. I almost don't want to call it vulnerability because it's been made into such a empty word in the last few years. People will say, okay, wait, I'm being vulnerable. I'm going to cry right now. I've seen that on TikTok. And I was like, well, that's not vulnerable if you announce it. And anyway, I'll come back to that. But, bring yourself to the stage, not this shell, not this representation of yourself, not the perfect person that I was telling you about. Just bring yourself with your flaws. If you get red, like I still do to this day, if you lose your track, if you don't exactly know how to stand, all of these things, just simply communicate that with your audience. Make a joke, be open, take a deep breath, say it. Say, oh, there's too much pressure right now. Let me take a deep breath. Just reach out to people's humanity. Remind them that you yourself are also a human standing there with all of your insecurities, all of your realness, and all of your flaws. And so that's also why I'm saying it is important to be super prepared, because you want to honor your audience. But it's also important to be real because you want to honor your audience. And I think it's that balance, that convergence of those two concepts that create connections that you'll never forget. I hope that this episode was helpful. Please send me your questions if there is something that I talked about that you want to hear more. Send me all of your questions. My email is everywhere. You can DM me on my Instagram. And I love, as I just explained, to get in touch with you. Have a great week, and I'm sending you love. Le Rendezvous is brought to you by Doré. Doré's latest launch, La Micellaire, is a botanical micellar cleansing water that doesn't require rinsing. Minimize bathroom time and maximize outdoor time with our super simple routine. Use code podcast10 for 10% off your first order. Thank you for listening to Le Rendezvous. If you want to know more about me, find out about my newsletter and my community, find me on Instagram at Garance Doré or at my website at garance.world. And well, if you'd like to find out how to spell that crazy name, just check out the show notes. Until next time, sending you love.